right. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Pack, and I am here to present to you on the Provider Behavior Change Toolkit. Just give me one moment. I will share my screen. Beautiful. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Like I said, my name is Allison Pack. I'm a program officer at the Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs and presenting to you on the Provider Behavior Change Toolkit, focus on family planning. So this toolkit guides users through a holistic, empathy-focused four-step process that supports providers, clients, and district health teams in designing, implementing, and evaluating effective provider facility-based provider behavior change initiatives. So this is done by identifying and understanding what most is influencing providers' behavior, and then designing and implementing locally appropriate solutions. So a little bit more about the toolkit itself. It's primarily for facility-based providers, but adaptations for community health workers are also available throughout the toolkit. The toolkit itself comes with an instruction booklet, which is available to print out, if you can kind of see on my screen there. And that instructions booklet walks users through each of these 4 steps: prepare, inquire, synthesize, and act, and offers options to adapt each of the steps to your local contexts. The implementers of this toolkit are going to be a multidisciplinary core team that we'll talk a little bit more in the next step. And also throughout the toolkit, it takes a multi-level approach. So you're gathering perspectives from a variety of stakeholders and also using a systems lens. So looking beyond just the individual level of what is influencing that individual provider's behavior, but looking at the system as a whole. So the health system, the community, the clients, of how those are influencing that provider behavior. So moving on to the steps themselves. In step number 1, prepare, the core implementation team is put together, and that consists of a variety of stakeholders with different skills that will have different roles and responsibilities throughout. And this is to ensure that we get that variety of perspectives just from the core team themselves. And also in this step, they are familiarizing themselves with the toolkit, creating a timeline to implement the toolkit, and selecting their samples, and also identifying the behavior of interest. So this is done by using the behavior mapping worksheet, as you see on the screen. This worksheet helps to identify the behavior of most interest, but specifically in that context. So I want to ask you as a group, are there any behaviors of interest that we could focus on as I go through the subsequent steps? Feel free to unmute yourselves or type into the chat. And no problem if there's no suggestions. We can focus on providing the behavior of providing contraception to youth. I chose this behavior because it can be influenced by a variety of factors. So with that in mind, we can move on to step number 2, inquire. This is where that core team will start to understand what is influencing that behavior of interest from multiple perspectives. So in this step, the team has access to several tools to get that variety of perspectives from the client, the providers themselves, district health officers, and also through observation of the facility. So we don't have time to go through all the tools, but just to highlight, let's look at the provider behavior blueprint. This tool gives the core team the chance to sit down with providers and get their perspective on what influences that behavior that they're focused on, but also from that system lens. So we have the chance to use, as you see on the screen, these influencing factor cards that are broken into different categories to cover each level of the system. So I'm going to ask each of you to put yourself in the shoes of a provider. Let's say that we sit down and we're discussing that behavior of providing contraception to youth. Now, just focusing on the community level, as you see on the screen, these dark blue cards, we would give the providers, yourselves, the opportunity to think through which of these influencing factors that you see in the cards do you think would most enable the behavior of providing contraception to youth? Any suggestions? These can be based off of what you see on the screen or anything that you think of, because there is the opportunity to have a blank card that users can fill out themselves. So an influencing factor that I believe most enables, thank you, Heather, yes. So the community definition of quality care, that could definitely be a factor that enables providing contraception to youth. So we would then take that physical card, as you see, I have some printed out on the screen, and we would put that onto the blueprint. I would then ask the providers, you all, to select what factor do you think prevents the behavior of providing contraception to youth. So perhaps a influencing factor that would prevent this behavior could be social stigma against certain groups. So we would then again take that card and place it on the blueprint. The core team would then have the opportunity to talk with the provider more in depth about why they chose those cards and their role in those behaviors and those influencing factors. And that same process would be done with each level of the system. So we're able to get that perspective of community level, client level, provider and colleague level, workplace and health system. So as you can see, we will be able to gather a lot of information just with this one tool, but we would be able to do similar actions with each of the other tools, getting that perspective from clients, providers, district health teams, and the facility. So with all of that information, step number 3 is so important because it focuses on synthesizing everything that you just learned. Within this step, there are 2 tools. The daily synthesis tool, where the team would sit down at the end of each day and have the opportunity to organize their thoughts and key takeaways just from that day. And then the global synthesis tool allows for the team to sit down at the end of the whole process, organize their thoughts, key takeaways, but then also start to prioritize the most influential factors and start to reframe those challenges as design questions. How might we address this? How might we address that? What is working? What is not working? Where are there opportunities? And that would lead them into step number 4, act. In this step, the core implementation team is able to start to generate and implement solutions that will support provider behavior change. And in this step, there are 2 different tools. The ideation tool, which helps to generate those locally appropriate solutions and start to allows the team to brainstorm which solutions could be actually implemented in their context. And with this tool, they would have access to inspiration cards. As you see on the screen on the right-hand side, there's 2 different examples of those cards, and I have a few printed out here as well. But these are just to help get those creative juices flowing of what could work in our context based off of the behavior of interest and those most influential factors. So thinking of providing contraception to youth and knowing that social stigma prevents that behavior, perhaps the group could consider a community norms change. And does anyone have any additional examples of what kind of initiatives could be used to help address those community level influential factors? These could be pulled from the examples I have on the screen or any other ideas. So perhaps using community theater, that could be a solution for the group. And based on that, they could use that idea as a baseline. They can then cater or adapt that initiative to be appropriate to their context through the use of the action planning tool. They figure out who needs to be involved, what resources, what is our timeline, but also what are the key indicators of success. So as we then move to the final stages of implementing the solution, how do we monitor and make sure that it is successful? We just have a few minutes left, but a few tips for implementation. As I mentioned, it's crucial to tailor the kit to the local context. You want to get buy-in from the MOH and get their input on where and how to implement this whole toolkit process, which may involve putting them on the core implementation team, because the core implementation team should be representative of local needs and contexts. And that team should also ensure that empathy is used throughout the process, really ensuring that a common vision is determined from the beginning, and that providers are part of the whole process and know that they are part of the solution and not part of the problem. And with that, with the few minutes we have left, I'd like to open the floor for questions.